I've always been a vivid dreamer, but never did I think my dreams could cross over into reality in such a terrifying way. It started on a cold autumn night about 2 years ago. I had just moved into a new apartment downtown, a small, quiet place on the third floor of an old brick building. The kind of building that looks like it has 1,000 stories trapped in its walls. On my very first night there, I fell asleep almost instantly. But what I saw in my dream that night was so real, it haunted me for weeks. In a dream, I was standing in my apartment's living room, but something was wrong. The air felt thick, heavy. The lights flickered erratically, casting shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. Then I noticed a figure, a tall, dark silhouette standing silently in the corner. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its gaze. Piercing through me, it didn't move, didn't speak. Then the silence was broken by a faint whisper, so low I could barely make it out. It said my name, over and over, like a chant. I woke up sweating, heart pounding. The apartment was pitch, dark but utterly silent. I told myself it was just a nightmare, the first night jitters in a new place. But what unsettled me most was that the next morning on my kitchen table, I found a single playing card, the ace of spades, facing up. I don't know how it got there. I live alone, had no visitors, and I never owned a deck of cards. Thinking it was a prank by the previous tenant or a leftover from the previous owner, I shrugged it off and threw the card away. But that night, the dream came back, more vivid and detailed. This time, the figure stepped closer. I could see now that it had no face, just a smooth, empty void where a face should be. It reached out its hand toward me, and I felt an unbearable coldness, like ice spreading through my chest. When I woke, my body was trembling, and I noticed something chilling. The clock on my nightstand read 3:33 a.m. exactly the same time as in my dream. That day, I went to work feeling drained, but tried to ignore it. Then came the phone calls. My phone rang exactly 3 times every night after that. Each call was silent, no breathing, no noise. Just the ringing stopping abruptly after 3 rings. The third night, I answered. No one spoke. Instead, a faint whisper echoed, my name followed by the sound of shuffling cards. I became obsessed with figuring out what was happening. I researched everything about the Ace of Spades. I learned that it's often called the death card, associated with bad luck, omens, and even death in some folklore. The whispering voice seemed to get louder in my dreams, and at night, I couldn't sleep without feeling eyes watching me dot, then the dreams changed again. This time, I saw not only the faceless figure, but a whole room. A dark parlor filled with old furniture. A dusty chandelier hanging overhead, and dozens of flame. Cards scattered across the floor. The figure motioned for me to pick one up. Hesitating, I reached down and grabbed a card. The moment I touched it, the dream shattered like glass. I woke up to a thundering heartbeat, and this time something worse awaited me. On my living room floor was the same playing card from the dream, the Ace of Spades again. But now it was stained with a dark red spot, like a drop of blood. I froze. My rational mind screamed it was impossible, but my eyes didn't lie. Panicking, I considered moving out, but something told me I had to face it. The dreams escalated to terrifying levels. The faceless figure began to speak clearly, warning me. The veil thins. You summoned me. You cannot escape. I had no idea what it meant. Summoned? I never invited anything here. One night, desperate for answers, I recorded my dreams using a voice recorder. The next morning, I played it back. At first, it was silence. Then, the whisper came through faintly, chilling me to the bone. I heard my name, followed by a soft clicking sound like cards being shuffled, and then a sinister laugh, low and hollowed out. I showed the recording to a friend who is a paranormal investigator. She told me I was dealing with an entity connected to the spirit world, drawn by a thin veil between dreams and reality. She warned me to avoid the apartment until I cleansed the space. I reluctantly agreed and stayed at a hotel that night. I hired a medium to come to the apartment to cleanse it. She found traces of a tragic history, The building was once home to a man who disappeared. Mysteriously, an avid gambler obsessed with cards who was believed to have cursed his own life. With dark magic, the medium said the entity I was encountering was tied to that man's spirit, trapped and angry, crossing over through the dreams. After the cleansing, the dreams stopped for a few days. I thought it was over, but then one night, I dreamed again this time. I was outside the building, looking up at the dark windows. The faceless figure appeared beside me, pointing to the top floor. I woke to a knock on my door. No one was there. But taped to my door was a single playing card, the Ace of Spades. When I realized that my dreams weren't just dreams, they were warnings. A bridge between the spirit world and my reality. And whatever had been summoned wasn't done with me yet. I moved out the next day. Even now, months later, I occasionally find a playing card somewhere unexpected in my wallet. In my shoes or slipped between pages of a book. The Ace of Spades. I don't know if it's a reminder or a threat, but I sleep with the lights on, and I never ignore a dream anymore. I never thought a simple trip for work would lead me down a path I couldn't escape. A path where the lines between dreams and reality blurred so completely. I started questioning everything I believed. It began on a rainy night when I pulled into the Hollow Creek Motel, a place I chose because it was the only option for miles. The sign was old and flickering, like something straight out of a horror movie. But I was exhausted and had no choice. That first night, after settling into the creaky, dimly lit room, I found an old leather-bound notebook tucked under the mattress. Curious, I opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten dream journals from previous guests. Some entries frantic, some eerie, others oddly prophetic. One entry caught my eye. A detailed dream about a man standing outside the motel window at exactly 2:22 a.m., watching the occupant sleep. The writer ended the entry with a chilling warning. If you see him, do not open the door. I chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke or maybe just the ramblings of a troubled guest. But that night, as the clock struck 2:22 a.m., I awoke to a soft tapping on the window. Heart pounding, I pulled back the curtain to see a shadowy figure standing just outside, motionless. My breath caught. The dream journal's warning echoed. In my mind, I froze, my eyes locked on the figure, trying to make out any details through the rain streaking down the glass. The figure didn't move or blink. It was just standing there, watching me with an intensity that sent shivers crawling up my spine. I didn't dare open the window or door, so I pulled the curtain back slowly and reached for my phone, ready to call for help. But the moment I picked it up, the tapping stopped and the figure vanished. The next morning, shaken and sleep-deprived, I went to the motel's small lobby to check out and find a new place. The clerk, an elderly woman with tired eyes, looked up as I approached. I showed her the notebook, explaining a dream entry and what happened last night. Oh, that old book, she said, voice low. It's been here for years. Guests leave their nightmares and dreams in it. Some of them come true. I laughed nervously, but her expression told me she wasn't joking. She leaned in and whispered, there was a man who stayed here long ago, someone who disappeared without a trace. Some say his spirit still roams these halls, watching guests through the windows at night. That night, unable to shake the unease, I reluctantly stayed another night. As I lay in bed, the rain tapping against the window again, I felt a cold presence in the room. Then, just like the night before, the tapping started, slow, deliberate. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, like someone trying to get my attention, but unwilling to show themselves fully. My heart pounded as I turned toward the window. Outside, the rain blurred the world, but there, just beyond the glass, a pale face stared back. The eyes were hollow, empty, but somehow piercing, burning into me. I closed my eyes tightly and tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. But when I opened them again, the face was gone. Sleep escaped me that night. I sat by the window until dawn, watching the storm rage outside. the notebook resting on my lap like a grim reminder. I flipped through its pages and, to my horror, found entries describing dreams nearly identical to my own. People visited by shadowy figures, warnings of danger, and even detailed descriptions of a man who vanished from the motel years ago. As the sun rose, I packed my bags and left without looking back. The rain had stopped, but the chill from those nights lingered. Weeks later, I received a postcard with no return address. On it was a simple message: some dreams cross over. Beware what you invite. It all began when I moved into my new apartment on the edge of the city. A small, quiet place that I thought would offer me the peace I desperately needed. The neighborhood was calm, the kind of place where everyone knows each other but keeps to themselves. I was recovering from a difficult year, and sleep was my only real escape. But soon, sleep became a trap. At first, the dreams were vivid but normal. I'd see places I'd never been, meet strangers whose faces I couldn't quite recall, and wake up feeling oddly refreshed. Then they started to change. I began dreaming of events that would happen the next day, things so small and specific. It freaked me out. A bird knocking against my window, a stranger wearing a red jacket crossing my street, a car horn blaring twice at exactly 7:03 a.m. The details from my dreams played out exactly as I'd seen them. I thought it was just coincidence, but the pattern was undeniable. I started to write everything down in a notebook, hoping to find some logic or pattern. But the dreams grew darker, more terrifying, more precise. One night, I dreamt that my apartment door would be left wide open when I woke up, with muddy footprints leading inside. I remember waking up, heart pounding, and cautiously looking at the door. It was ajar, just like in my dream. The footprints were there too. I called the police, but there was no evidence of forced entry, and no one had been inside. They suggested it might have been my forgetfulness, but I knew better. I felt watched, vulnerable, and completely terrified. Things escalated quickly. The dreams started to include people I didn't know but who felt deeply familiar. In one dream, a man stood silently at the foot of my bed, watching me. The next day, I saw him walking past my apartment, his face hauntingly the same as the man in my nightmare. I confided in a friend about what was happening, and she suggested I see a therapist. But even therapy couldn't prepare me for the worst. Dream of all. One night, I dreamt I was running through a dark forest, chased by a faceless figure. I ran until I reached a clearing where I found myself trapped in a circle of ancient stones. The figure caught me, and I felt a cold ground my wrist. Then the faceless figure whispered in a voice that was both mine and not mine. You cannot escape what you dream. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, but the nightmare stayed with me like a shadow. That day, I found a strange mark on my wrist, a faint, circular scar that hadn't been there before. It was exactly like the stone circle in my dream. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe I'd scratch myself in my sleep. But every night, the dreams returned, growing more invasive, more personal. They showed me glimpses of my future, terrible accidents, losses, and betrayals. I was losing control. Then the worst happened. I dreamt that I wouldn't wake up, that my body would be found cold and lifeless in the morning. The details were so real, the pale light of dawn filtering through the curtains, the sound of rain tapping on the window, the look on the faces of the paramedics. When I woke up, something inside me had changed. I couldn't shake the feeling that the dream was a warning. I started to live like I was running out of time, trying to change fate. But the more I fought, the more trapped I felt. One morning, I woke up to find the apartment exactly as in the dream. Dawn light, rain on the window, and silence that felt like the calm before a storm. I realized then that the line between my dreams and reality had blurred completely. I was no longer the dreamer. I was the dream,